And now, the Lowdown, with economist and political strategist Elson Low.
Good evening, and welcome to the Lowdown. Welcome to the Lowdown. It's Saturday night. You know that Saturday night is the night for the Lowdown. Thank you for joining us. Folks, we apologize for being a little bit late tonight. We apologize. Please share the link. Let's get everyone in. Let's let everyone know that the show is on. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being with us here on the Lowdown. I'm your host, Elson Low, and it's good to be here as always. Starting your Saturday on a high with Elson Low. Welcome to the Lowdown. Share the link. Let's give everyone a chance to come in tonight. It's going to be a fascinating show. You know, we always try to give you some interesting insights here. You know, we always try to give you the Lowdown. Share the link, folks. Share the link. We're gonna have an interesting show tonight. We're gonna cover some interesting international topics as well as some domestic ones. We've got some U-turns by the government that we're gonna cover. We've got some brave moves by the government, not brave in a good way, but brave moves by the government that we're gonna cover as well. Share the link, folks. Share the link. Let's get into it. Let's get into an interesting, fascinating show tonight. Share that link. Give everyone a chance to be on. Welcome to the Lowdown. It's another Saturday night. You know, we try to keep it light. You know, we try to make it a fun show. So we've got our memes of the week for you. We're going to talk a bit about the cost of living as this continues to be painful for Guyanese. We're going to talk a bit about the auction of Guyana's offshore oil blocks, and the question of a national oil company. So that will be a very interesting one. We're going to talk as well about the production sharing agreement, the new model PSA that we're supposed to get. We're supposed to get a new production sharing agreement to determine the country's revenues from the oil and gas industry. So we're going to have that conversation. Should be very interesting. We're going to talk a little bit about some areas of advice. You know, we always try to give some advice to young people and the Chinese more generally as to how to position yourself as our economy changes. So we're going to talk about all of these things. We've got an interesting show tonight, folks. A bit of an international bent because we want to talk a bit about the crisis in Ukraine, about the war in Ukraine. We're going to chat a little bit about how that is affecting things internationally and how that is affecting your everyday lives, how that's affecting you, because we've now got a question that's been raised again about the price of wheat. The price of wheat is once again at the top of the conversation. Folks, you know that we had a real spike in the price of wheat as a result of the war in Ukraine. That, unfortunately, as much as people thought that it might be going away, does not seem to be the case. So we're gonna go into that. We're gonna go into it. Share the link, folks. Share the link. Let's give everyone a chance to see the show. Let's give everyone a chance to be here with us on the Lowdown. It's going to be fun. It always is fun. And on that note, let's get the first slide up. Okay, folks. Okay. So we've got some citizens complaining about the road situation. You know, we have the meme of the week. Not all the roads you take in life will be smooth, according to the Ministry of Public Works. So we know that we've been seeing some reports of some Latham-style roads here, some roads that are looking like the roads that you see in the interior in Guyana, but on the coast. Recently, in a recent show, we covered a Ministry of Public Works vehicle that was actually stuck in one of these roads. The pothole was so deep, people were asking whether it's a trench or not. That's something that citizens are complaining about. Folks, you may have seen recently that certain citizens have been putting coconuts in the potholes in their particular roads. Coconut man is what they're calling him, who puts coconuts in the potholes as a way to fix these potholes. Unbelievable, unbelievable. But you may recall, viewers, that under the coalition, there was endless maintenance works and so on to really rejuvenate the road network in Guyana. That's not what we're seeing right now. So as a result, people are out here complaining, folks, complaining. What's Let's get the next slide up. Okay. So here we have someone making a comment about good old Gaisuko. You know, Gaisuko always seems to have something going on there. Billions of our tax dollars are donated to Gaisuko annually, and people have to be lining up to purchase sugar. I just really can't understand the nonsense Burnham be doing. Oh wait, so folks, no, this is not something that can be attributed to Burnham. You know, people likes to attribute everything to Burnham that they can possibly attribute. But right now, under their governance, we are seeing Gaisuku in some really difficult straits. Folks have to line up to purchase sugar. Now, of course, the government is styling this as saying that there's no shortage. They're providing sugar to people. But it seems to me that in the past, we never had to line up to purchase sugar. And so if we have to line up to purchase sugar now, then that means that something is up, something is off. And in fact, for several weeks, citizens have been complaining about a lack of access to sugar and not being able to get it pretty much in any place. I myself, you know, in my morning coffee, I've been having to find ways around the sugar thing. Whether you put some peanut butter in it, whether you put some jam to try and sweeten it. Ridiculous, ridiculous, folks. Just imagine that over $50 billion has been pumped into Gaisuko in the last 5 or 6 years. $50 billion, more than that. We are seeing the government again say that billions need to go towards Gaisuko, and yet we cannot see production on the level that we really want to see from Gaisuko, and we can't see citizens are not getting access to sugar locally. Unbelievable, but them is the breaks, folks. Those are the facts of the situation. Of course, we in the coalition have spoken about the need for retraining Gaisuko workers so that they can get higher income jobs and so on. But the government doesn't seem to have too much of a focus, on that. So as a result, we have to put up with a Gaisuko situation that is deteriorating at great velocity, deteriorating quite quickly. Let's get the next slide up, folks, as we continue with the memes of the week here. Now we've got a situation where we've seen a fire at St. George's High School. Very sad to see a fire there. And the St. George's, the parishioners, the people who actually worship at St. George's Cathedral have said that they spent a lot of money restoring the cathedral itself, and that they would be happy to receive some financial assistance to properly restore the school. So that's really something that to keep in mind. But you know, Guyanese always like to make it with this school. That is rough. The school really, it seemed, was engulfed in flames pretty much immediately, which is really terrifying. That a building could go up so quickly, and it's a historic building. I believe it's built in 1809 or something like that. So it's a historic building. It's very old, and unfortunately, it went up in flames in no time. We're no stranger to seeing government buildings and these sorts of things burn in Guyana. That has been a sad recurrence. I'd point gently to the fact that we have not seen the mass digitization program that has been called for. Have not seen the government make any efforts towards a mass digitization program for our national records, given that we have such a great vulnerability to fire. So I mean, I guess the government is perfectly fine with the status quo where there's a great vulnerability to fire. Anyway, we've had parishioners, we've had people from St. George's Cathedral saying that they need assistance in order to rebuild and in order to ensure that these historic buildings are kept in the best of condition. So that's something that we'd like to see the government do. Let's get the next slide up there, viewers. Okay, so We've got another joke sliding on in here, folks. We keep the jokes rolling. We keep the jokes rolling. So Cheating is down 60% due to gas price. Men are going straight home after work. Folks, you know that we've had a period of prolonged high gas prices. Prolonged high gas prices. Now, apparently, according to this particular this particular person, cheating is down because and can't afford it. Can't afford it anymore. The gas price too high. The We've of course seen the government say that nothing more that can be done regarding gas prices, which I believe to be a mistake in terms of a policy move. And the coalition, the PNCRs, particularly proposed a way to bring down gas prices and keep them down, which is through compensating suppliers for any prices that are above a determined level. That way, the consumer will always receive the price at what we consider to be a reasonable amount. That we've also called for vouchers for those who are engaged in transportation of goods, especially food stuff like canters from the farm to the market. And so that is a way that we can easily bring down the cost of living, bring down the cost of food, both directly at the pump and through bringing down inflation with food items. Now, the UPS said can't do that. They're not interested in that. I guess they're just not interested in. They're just not interested in the food crisis, folks. Just not interested in it. We're going to talk a bit more, though. We're going to talk a bit more about this gasoline crisis and some of the risks associated with it. We've mentioned that there's a Russia dynamic to this, but we'll give you a little bit more insight on this particular show. And hopefully that will help you to kind of understand what really is going on when it comes to the Russia situation and gas prices. Let's get the next slide up, folks. Okay, so we've now got a situation that in the war with Ukraine that is unfortunately perpetuating this conflict. What has essentially gone on is that you've seen an agreement between the Ukraine and Russia to allow grain shipments to proceed. Of course, the reason that you've seen flour and the price of your everyday bread, even your tennis roll, go up is because the wheat that's supposed to come from that region has not been able to come from that region. As a result of that, you've really had an unfortunate situation where wheat prices have had to go through the roof because we don't have as much access to wheat. We don't have as much access to wheat. The wheat has either been destroyed by the conflict or is locked away in Ukraine and Russia. That's what's going on. Very unfortunate. Now, we had an agreement between Ukraine and Russia to allow some of that wheat to float, to allow this wheat to access the open market. But unfortunately, we've seen almost immediately after that agreement was put into effect, we've seen some strikes on the port facilities, some of which would be required to carry out to export this wheat. So what has happened is that there's a real question as to whether or not any of these agreements, this particular agreement, will actually have any effect. The reason that there's concern whether or not it will have any effect is if you have an agreement and then 2 minutes later there's a missile strike which destroys some port facilities, which stops the agreement from actually taking effect, stops people from actually exporting the grain, what that means is that we're back at square one, essentially. So that is a real concern. That is something that people were calling on or looking forward to as lowering the price of grain. But that's not what we've seen. Instead, what we've seen is a situation where there is an anticipation that the price of wheat may remain elevated. The price of your daily bread, folks, literally your daily bread, will remain high throughout much of the rest of the year until this conflict calms down. Very unfortunate. We've actually got a video which just gives you a sense of what's been going on, and we're gonna jump into that. And viewers, you can take a quick look. Yeah, we're gonna jump right into that video. That'll give you a sense of what's been going on with the Ukraine wheat crisis.
Ukraine's military has said only a day after a deal was signed to try and unblock grain exports across the Black Sea. The landmark agreement signed between Moscow and Kyiv on Friday is seen as crucial to curbing soaring global food prices. UN officials said they hoped the agreement would be operational within a few weeks. But it was not yet clear if that would still be possible, given Saturday's reported strikes.
По Одещині було нанесено ракетний удар.
Natalia Humeniuk, spokeswoman for Ukraine's Operational Command South, said there was no significant damage from the strikes or casualties.
4 ракети типу «Калібр».
She said 2 missiles hit infrastructure and 2 were intercepted by air defense forces. Ukraine's foreign ministry called on the United Nations and Turkey, which mediated the grain deal, to ensure that Russia fulfills its commitments and allows free passage in the grain corridor. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he unequivocally condemns the reported strikes. Turkey's defense minister said Russia had told Ankara it had nothing to do with this attack and were examining the issue very closely and in detail. A blockade of Ukraine's ports by Russia's Black Sea Fleet since Moscow's February 24th invasion has trapped tens of millions of tons of grain. With Russia and Ukraine both major global wheat suppliers, food prices have soared. The crisis has pushed some 47 million people into acute hunger, according to the World Food Programme. Russia, which called its invasion a special military operation, has denied responsibility. It blames Western sanctions for slowing its own food and fertilizer exports, and Ukraine for mining the approaches to its Black Sea ports. Under Friday's deal, Ukrainian officials would guide ships through safe channels across the mined waters to 3 ports, including Odessa, where they would be loaded with grain. Volodymyr Zelensky said on Friday the deal would make around $10 billion worth of grain available for sale, with roughly 20 million tons of last year's harvest to be exported.
Should give you some perspective as to what we're talking about here. The word I would use is huge. Huge amounts of wheat, huge amounts of grain there that are not able to access the market, not able to come to your kitchen table. That's why your prices are very high. That's a difficult situation that we're going to be facing in going forward. One thing that I find to be interesting is that there is an indication that millions of people have been pushed into a food crisis because of this. And you may think to yourself, oh, it's in various countries that have their own difficulties and so on. It's not here in Guyana. But we've seen a report state that many Guyanese have started to skip meals in order to deal with these inflationary pressures, these higher prices. They start to skip meals. So this is not something that's affecting somebody else, it's affecting us. That's something that we have to keep in mind. That is something that we have to keep in mind is actually affecting us as much as it's affecting other people in other parts of the world. That's one leg of it. That's one leg of it. Let's get the next slide up as we continue this discussion. So there is a hope or an optimistic outlook that says that we could see inflation cool off. We could see prices start to come down over the course of the year. That, however, number one, because of this conflict persisting with Ukraine and Russia, does not seem to be the case. But also there's great risk, and we've mentioned this before, that as the year rolls on and more sanctions take effect in Russia, you may see the oil price climb a lot. What does this mean for us here in Guyana? It means 2 things. One, it means that we'll get much more oil revenue. We have an higher oil price. Okay, great. But 2 is that it means that for citizens, you may be facing much higher prices at the pump, and you may be facing much higher inflation across many goods because the price of gasoline is involved in the production of so many things. Gasoline is involved in the production of so many things, whether to create electricity or whether more directly in products such as plastics and so on. What does that mean for you? It means that we need to see further action by the government, serious action by the government to mitigate these costs, to redistribute some of these surplus benefits to the broader population to ensure that they're able to not feel the cost of living squeeze. That is something that is really top of mind, and we're going to get into that in a second. But we've got another quick video, it's not a couple of minutes, that we'll talk a little bit about this potential oil price issue And that will hopefully help us to get a good handle on it. So our next video will be about the oil price issue with Russia. That's something that's we're going to put up in a second there. And that will give you some perspective, because we as Guyanese, as an oil producing country, got to start talking about oil. That's going to be bread and butter for this country. Sugar was bread and butter for so long. We talk a lot about sugar. Now it's time for us to talk a lot about oil. And for every Guyanese to have a sense of what's going on and how it might impact the path of the country. So we've got a video that will be on in a second there that will go into some of the details on this.
We're joined by Mike Rothman, founder of macro energy research firm Cornerstone Analytics.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So that possibility there, Russia saying, we heard from the Russian central bank governor saying that for countries that are in on this potential price cap on Russian oil, Russia wouldn't supply oil to them. What kind of impact would that have?
Devastating. Russia is the second largest exporter of oil in the world after Saudi Arabia. And if you look at crude and products, it totals around 8 million barrels a day, which nobody can make up. Not OPEC, not all of the emergency stocks if they were released at the same time. So it would be a devastating impact to the market. And the market's already in a tightening trend.
And I wonder, Mike, the governor also said, the Bank of Canada governor, no, the governor of the Russian central bank also said that countries that were ready to cooperate with Russia they would be able to redirect the oil or other, energy products to them. Would that have an impact?
So what's getting a little bit lost is that you have the U.S. embargo already in place. That affects about 10% of Russian flows. And then, of course, the bigger beast afoot is the European embargo, which is supposed to have started getting phased in this month and be phased in by the end of the year. That's about 3.5 million barrels a day. So that's a much bigger chunk. That's about 40% of Russia's flows. And the issue Russia will have is not these various schemes about getting paid in rubles or some other manner to evade banking issues. It's whether Russia will be able to really place oil that should go to Europe into other countries. That's the big concern, and that's a concern everybody should have. The secondary issue, which doesn't seem to be getting too much airtime right now, is Russia's disruption potentially of natural gas. Now, they send out the equivalent of about 4 million barrels a day of natural gas. Most of that is to Europe. And the issues that are afoot and what's been affecting the market both ways in the last week is discussions about whether those exports are actually going to be disrupted. Oil market that's already tight, losing any supply.
Okay, folks. So hopefully that's giving you just a little flavor of, just a little taste of what's going on. Just to help you to understand directly what's going on, though, there's essentially the European Union is going to be imposing a price cap. That is to say, if oil is trading at $100 on the market, they're only going to be paying, let's say, $60 to the Russians. And if the Russians decided they're going to supply oil, all is well. If they decide they're not going to supply oil, then they're not going to supply that oil. Now, what that means is that it will allow, hypothetically, it's going to allow the European countries to get oil, and so everything will be stable, while at the same time they can punish Russia. But there is a possibility, and this is what was being discussed, that Russia will reduce its output. And in fact, what they have said is that they will reduce their output if any of these countries impose the cap. They will not be providing them with oil. This means that they have to find somewhere else to send that oil. If they're not successful in doing that, there'll be a real tension in the market. There'll be a real problem in that there won't be enough oil to go around. And if there's not enough oil to go around, that means the price has to go up. This is something that is really unprecedented. And as much as these numbers may sound absurd to you, and I understand that, there is a risk that oil is going to be over $300 a barrel if that happens. So that is what many people are concerned about, that there's going to be, at the end of the year, as the year winds on, another big shock in the oil price. So we have to remain alert to this. Two reasons. One, in our daily lives, it'll affect us. When you're looking to actually buy gasoline at the pump, that's a price that you'll have to pay, a higher price. When you're looking to travel around towns, higher price. When you're looking at food costs, higher prices. But on the other hand, it would mean that the government will be making way more revenue, way more revenue, way more. And as a result, we need to see some redistribution of that to cushion the situation locally. We in the PNCR have called for a redistribution of some of these revenues to keep the gas prices low. So we're going to use these extra funds to actually pay for these lower prices locally, lower gas prices locally, and to keep food prices and so on down by reducing the cost of transporting food from the market, from the farm to the market. That's what we're saying is necessary. We've heard the government say nothing more can be done. This is a very risky position for them to take in case this conflict escalates. And as it stands, that is the expectation. However, we'll have to see how things go as the year progresses. Folks, we are now an oil economy. And as a result of that, we've got to be talking about oil. I've got a graph here that shows a pie chart that shows the percent of Guyana's exports that are oil. Let's see if we can bring that up. That's not quite the right chart. There we go. That's the right chart. Folks, we've got in excess of 70% of Guyana's exports. In excess of 70% of Guyana's exports at the beginning of this year is oil. Already that much is in the oil and gas industry. We've been producing sugar, rice, various other crops, shrimp, but no, in just a few years, we've come to a position where almost 80% of our exports is oil. Everyone in this country has got to pay attention to and understand what is going on in the oil market, in the world when it comes to gasoline. Why is that? Because your daily lives will be affected directly at the pump, but also because it will give you a sense of what the government revenues are like and what their capacity is to help citizens. This is what is going on. The vast majority of Guyana's exports is oil. We're going to see the government make between $1 billion and $1.5 billion US of revenue. Huge amounts from the oil and gas industry. That's what's going to be in our natural resources fund. Huge amounts. So as a result of that, we really need to put pressure on the government to deliver when it comes to assisting citizens with things like the cost of living. Now, as much as we're saying that, we've seen the government now go back to Parliament for a supplemental budget, going back for additional funds. We've spoken on this show about how the government has only put less than 1% of the national budget, which was by far the largest budget in the country's history, almost 50% bigger than the previous years, less than 1% towards cost of living mitigation. Folks, you would think that the government, in going back to the National Assembly, going back to Parliament, would be saying, well, now that we've seen this real spike in the cost of living, we're going to have a budget which focuses, we're going to create a supplemental budget which focuses on alleviating that cost of living pain. But citizens, you'd be wrong. I think we have a slide there which talks about the government's supplemental budget that they've recently gone back to Parliament for. Recently gone back, not that one, another slide. Not that one. There we go. There we go. Government seeking $44.7 billion. $44.7 billion. You know how much of that is directed towards cost of living mitigation, towards these serious issues? Not much, folks. There's only funds, as far as we can tell, for hinterland communities, and not many funds, a few $1 billion. But the broader population is not benefiting from any kind of substantial effort. It's pretty clear that at least maybe like $50-60 billion, give or take, is probably what needs to be spent in order to have citizens really be able to weather this storm. If you look at the minimum wage level, if you look at the level of inflation, you're looking at between $50 and $60 billion that needs to be put out in one way or another to compensate for this inflationary pressure, this cost of living pressure. But instead, what we've seen is a meager $5 billion, a meager $3 billion. The $3 billion is not going to the broader society. It's going to some communities, not everyone. And the majority of the funds, where is it going? It's going to housing. It's going to excuse me, Gaisuko. I mean, if there is an example of the government just not getting it, I think this is the clearest example that we've seen to date. And folks, I know I may be painting a gloomy picture of how the government is operating. I know that I'm painting a picture that's a bit down. But this is not even the half of how bad this situation is. This is not even half of it. Do you know that between the last budget to this budget, between the last budget to this budget, the full year budget to this supplemental, in that 6 month, 7 month period between when we passed that last budget to this one, do you know that Guyana's estimates for how quickly this country will grow have jumped by a whole 10%? We were expected to grow at about 48%. Now we're expected to grow at about 58%. A whole 10%. For a country to grow at 10%, first of all, is an unbelievable thing. That's high levels of growth. You're talking about some of the highest levels of growth that you would have seen in China, as an example. So that 10% jump is already massive. But what we're seeing is that from the time they passed the last budget to now, the expectations for the growth of the economy have jumped, massively jumped. So that means that we should be expecting as citizens to see a budget that helps to show the broader economy the benefits, helps citizens to feel those benefits immediately. Is that what you're seeing in this budget? Is that what you're seeing in this budget? The last budget was before the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine sent prices through the roof. We've discussed this at length. Guyanese have been feeling this pain for months. You think this budget is doing anything about that cost of living nightmare? Nothing. Nothing. Hardly anything is in this budget for that cost of living nightmare. And I'm saying to myself, man, these fellows brave. I was not bringing a budget to Parliament. These circumstances without a dime for people. That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable. Not only have you had a massive increase in the cost of living because of the circumstances, you have had a massive increase in the growth of the country because of the high oil price. Massive increase. But are you spending any of this money to assist ordinary citizens in their day-to-day struggle in this difficult time? Wow. Wow. Folks, if it was unclear to you what the government's priorities are, if it was unclear to you whether or not the government really cared about the plight of ordinary citizens, it's not clear to you now? Could it be any clearer? Could it be any clearer, citizens? Is it possible for it to be any clearer? We have got an opportunity here for the government to pass a substantial budget to assist citizens in these difficult times. This is a perfect opportunity for them to assist citizens in these difficult times. It is ideal. But no, 21 billion for housing, 100 million for legal fees, 3.4 billion for Gaisuko. And the budget, the supplemental by itself, is already too small. Folks, these guys serious. These guys serious. They intend to allow Guyanese to punish. I'm telling you, that's what the PUP intends, to allow Guyanese to punish through this entire period. This is the perfect opportunity to assist Guyanese. They should even actually have done this earlier, done a supplemental budget much earlier, because, of course, this is not since yesterday that we've had the cost of living issues, that yesterday that you had the war in Ukraine. It's been something that's been going on for some time. So this should have happened much earlier. But now that they actually go to Parliament to ask for funds, the funds, first of all, this is not a large budget. And second of all, this has almost nothing for cost of living mitigation. These folks brave, citizens, my fellow Guyanese, this can't stand. This is unbelievable. It's not as if the country is in a difficult position. This country is the fastest growing in the world, and it started to grow even faster from the last time they passed the budget. There's even more money being made in the National Treasury. And yet, The decision by the government is not to put any of that money back in your pocket. We've seen them withdraw from the Natural Resources Fund on 2 occasions, 40 billion, another 40 billion. Any of that, a dime of that going towards cost of living mitigation, a dime, a dollar, not $1, folks, not $1. This is the situation that we're faced with. A government which does not care, is open, is straightforward about the fact that it doesn't care, isn't trying to hide it. So you have to decide to yourself what you want to do in this circumstance with a government like that. Unbelievable. I don't know how they can possibly argue that they're interested in this issue, given this is a perfect opportunity to pass a sizable budget to effectively deal with the issue. That's not what we have here. A few crumbs for a few communities, something here and there, but nothing substantial, and certainly nothing broad-based across the whole of Guyana. Wow, wow, wow. Well, folks, hey, if they want to take those risks, they got to take those risks. But I'm telling you, that is pretty unbelievable, pretty unbelievable, pretty unbelievable, pretty unbelievable. But hey, that's the situation, folks. We have got to continue to apply pressure. It took months and months to get the minimum wage. Simple thing like the minimum wage to be raised from $44,000 to $60,000. A meager $44,000. It took 6 months. Just imagine. Folks, we've now, we now want to talk a bit more about what's going on with GAISUCO, get a sense of what's going on with GAISUCO. Let's throw up this that graph we have of GAISUCO's production. We've got a graphic there of the production in GAISUCO under the coalition versus under the PUP. That just gives you an idea of what's been going on with GAISUCO, the difficult circumstances. So there you go. You've got an increase in production, steady increase in production under the coalition, and then a fall off on the PUP in production, a huge fall off in production. Now, we've also seen in the course of this massive fall in production, we've actually seen a reduction in the amount of the targets that we've set. We've seen a reduction in the targets that have been set. Each year, the targets of GAISUCO has been set. And this year, we've actually seen, if you can believe this, GAISUCO not meet those reduced targets by a large margin, not meet those reduced targets. Because of this and because of difficulties in rice, the non-oil economy is struggling. The non-oil economy is not doing well. The oil economy is doing fine, but the non-oil economy is not doing well. And a lot of people at GAISUCO, I'm sure, are faced with great insecurity about what direction GAISUCO is going. We have previously said that as much as we need to have the right size for GAISUCO, what we really need to do is to retrain GAISUCO workers so they can get higher income jobs in the oil and gas industry and in other industries in this country. You can only make so much at GAISUCO when you're not being productive, when your actual amount of output is falling. Rather, we have a country that's rapidly expanding. What we need to do is to retrain people so that they can fill jobs and get higher salaries. We want those at GAISUCO to get the training so that they can get these higher salaries. But that's not what the government's focused on. They could have been doing this all along. We've called for I believe it was $5 billion that was in the last budget for GAISUCO. We've called for that to be put towards training. No efforts on that front. Now further funds. No real mention of training. Of course, there is going to be the Port Moran school that will be an oil and gas training school, but that's down the road. What about now? What about all the other areas that training could have taken place in? What about all the efforts that could have already been happening in order to move this industry forward? Instead, they pumped billions of dollars into the industry with no results to show for it. Actually, things have gotten substantially worse. Even if you say that the flood has had a role, yes, it has had a role, But Gao has come out to say that they don't think that the flood was a significant factor because the company is supposed to have adjusted to deal with that, number one. And number two, the production target was reduced by about 30%. So the expectation was that it would be a 30% reduction in what Gaisuko even needed to do. And that has also not been met. You've had a breakdown at Iflot. Stop grinding sugar there. You've had a situation where workers have been on strike, workers have been dissatisfied with the company, with Gaisuko. We've had all of these things happen. And in the midst of all of this, we continue to pour money towards Gaisuko without having a proper plan as to where we need to take this industry. Without having that. We're now hearing about a packaging plant that is going to be put in place. A packaging plant for Gaisuko that's supposed to be in Albion and supposed to assist there. We've had packaging plants before that have not made Gaisuko profitable. But just moving this packaging plant from where it is right now, which is in Demerara, to the Boris region, is $400 million to move the plant. Just to move it. This is the ridiculousness about how money is being wasted. Absolutely wasted. What is going on with the government's management of Gaisuko? What is going on? We've had the president pull in various Gaisuko managers and say, oh, we're not spending this money on you for nothing. That's what the government is saying. The government is saying, we have a mission, we have a plan. Next morning, there's a sugar shortage. 2 mornings later, there's a sugar shortage. What is the government doing? All of that show, and this is the result. What is going on? What is the government doing? We have had them speak at length to Gaisuko managers. And about 10 minutes later, there's a sugar shortage in the country. People can't get sugar at the various supermarkets and so on. I myself couldn't get sugar. Unbelievable. But, I think it's important for there to be a proper plan to move forward with that industry, to move in the right direction, to get things going in the right direction. We have talked about training. We've talked about jobs. That is what needs to happen. I have previously expressed my own opinion that Suko should be renamed the Guyana Oil and Gas Training Center, and that there should be a total focus on oil and gas training. Because I believe quite a lot of Gaisuko workers actually can easily transition to the oil and gas sector with some training. So that is something that I believe is very important. But I can tell you this, the PNCR will put forward some proposals regarding adjustments to Gaisuko that will allow those at the company to really move forward with their lives, do better, grow, rather than remaining in place. And as the graph demonstrates, we showed you just now, sliding backwards, things declining. It is going to put Gaisuko under even more pressure. There you go, a big slide. Look at that slide, straight down. It's going to put the company under tremendous pressure if it can't even produce any sugar. If you have shortages across this country, it'll put the Gaisuko workers under tremendous pressure by the public at large. This is not fair to Gaisuko workers. It is not fair to them. This needs to be run better by the government. It is totally unfair. And as a result of being totally unfair, these Gaisuko workers are more and more in a precarious position. They don't know what the future will hold. If that graph continues on that trajectory, will they be producing any sugar at all? Look at that graph. That's ridiculous. But that's what we're seeing. Gotten so bad that you're seeing shortages of sugar itself. Folks, I like a little bit of sugar. I mean, I'm a young man. Maybe I eat too much sugar, but for a couple of days there, I was in a tough place. No sugar available. My little sugar addiction put me in a hard spot. No sugar available. Yeah, I mean, I'm trying with peanut butter to flavor my coffee. I'm trying with jam to flavor my coffee. It's ridiculous. This is how absurd. This is how absurd the situation has gotten. Tens of billions spent on Gaisuko. Tens of billions, and the opposite of progress. Whatever the opposite of progress is, that's what we're seeing. No, folks. At the same time, you've got a rapidly expanding economy. About 150,000 jobs we believe will be created over the course of a 10 to 15-year period. Rapid expansion. Don't you think that we need to restructure the economy so that we have a lot of these workers in areas where they're going to make more money? Isn't that obvious? Isn't that obvious? Rather than keeping them here in a more and more precarious situation because of how poorly the government is dealing with the company. But folks, seems to be obvious to me. Perhaps it's not obvious to some. Perhaps it's not obvious to some. We're gonna just to give you a taste of what we're gonna look at in the next show, and then we're gonna close off this evening. But what we wanna give you a sense, because we always talk about advice to young people. We've got our last video we want to throw up, so you can take a look at that, folks. And that will give you a sense of some of the developments in the oil and gas industry. As we said, you got to know this oil and gas industry. That's where the economy is headed. We've actually seen in the US some setbacks in terms of them moving away from fossil fuels. And this has pushed out the timeline as to when a lot of these reforms will happen. What this means is that there'll likely be a bit more demand for petroleum products for a longer period of time. So as a result, we need to adjust our thinking and our planning here in Guyana, because it may not be that there's going to be a transition away from petroleum products, from fossil fuels and towards renewables as quickly as some may think. In fact, that may have been delayed by several years, or at least it seems it has substantially been delayed. Let's take a look at the video, and I'll hopefully give you some perspective, viewers, and we'll chat a bit on the other side of it.
As the nation swelters through this heat wave, any immediate climate action is on the ropes after two stinging defeats. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin from Coleridge, West Virginia, today defending his decision to block President Biden's climate legislation, including tax incentives for wind and solar power and electric vehicles. Manchin says it calls for spending that will send inflation even higher.
I haven't walked away from anything, and inflation is my greatest concern.
Add to that the Supreme Court limiting the EPA's ability to regulate carbon emissions from power plants, the nation's second largest source of the gases driving climate change. What do those two developments do to President Biden's climate agenda?
Well, there's no sugarcoating it. They are major setbacks.
Biden hoped to cut U.S. greenhouse gas emissions in half by 2030. Polls show a majority of Americans, 65%, are worried about global warming. But only 1% of voters say climate change is the top issue facing the country. Among voters under 30, that number rises only to 3%. Climate change always seems to be the issue that we can put off until tomorrow. Are we at the point that we can no longer put off acting on climate change?
We absolutely should not be putting off action on climate change. 30 years ago, it was a problem for the future. It is a problem for now.
President Biden is promising executive action, but climate activists believe without Congress acting to speed up wind and solar installations and electric vehicle purchases, it won't be enough.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel.
The NBC News app.
All right, folks. All right. So interesting news. Let me put it this way. Let's put aside right or wrong, whether you support or don't support the use of fossil fuels. Let's put all of that aside and just talk about what this means for Guyana. What this means is that it is likely that we're going to see much slower adoption of renewables in a wide variety of areas than would otherwise have happened if the US government was going to provide huge financial support, whether it's through direct spending or whether it's tax incentives to encourage the adoption of renewables. Okay, whether right or wrong, that's for you as viewers to discuss, but that's the circumstance that we're now faced with. The reason, or one of the reasons that this has kind of come up, which was mentioned, and of course there may be many reasons, and there is discussion that is worth having around this, is the question of these higher oil prices, meaning that oil producers need to pump more in order to help to bring prices down, to supply the market, to help consumers because of these high prices. being felt in various parts of the world, being felt all over the world. Of course, in Guyana, we're growing at about 60%. So we should be benefiting, we should be laughing, citizens should be rejoicing. Does it feel to you like your life is all that better off? That's the question you have to ask. But that is something that we have to keep in mind, and in a further show, we're going to discuss at length some of these issues as it relates to the question of a national oil company, the production sharing agreement, all these types of things we're going to discuss later on. But the point being that we must now always be alert to changes in the international market and how they'll affect things. We must be alert to how the Russian oil crisis affects what is going on in Guyana. We must be alert to how the Saudi Arabian response to various oil crises affects things in Guyana. We must be alert to how the production of oil in Texas and some of these other areas affects Guyana. This is a new age. This is a new age for our country. And we have got to be aware. Just as we are talking about Gaisuko, we're talking about the various problems in Gaisuko. We've been talking about it for ages. Many people are aware of the issues with Gaisuko. Now we have to shift a lot of our focus and be aware of the oil industry, what is going on, what are the factors to consider, what are the important developments. That's what we have to do. I've mentioned that we need to do an oil check every time, every day. Last I checked, oil is $103 a barrel. Do an oil check. Keep this on top of your mind. That feeds in nicely to the advice. Of course, we try to give some advice to young people regarding how they can position themselves. One thing I'd say is a simple one is, as we see this economy expand, if we expect to see 150,000 jobs, maybe 30,000 jobs in the oil industry at a minimum, get qualified, get some training, build your skills, try and be able to lean into that industry. That's going to be something that you can benefit from hugely. So that's something that I think is right off of the bat, something to do. Another thing is, you've got the University of Guyana there. Pressure the government to make the University of Guyana free. Do that. You should not be paying for you to better your skills and qualifications in a nation which badly needs those skills and qualifications. Recall that less than 3% of the population has a bachelor's degree. Less than 3%. And less than 1% a master's. This is according to Bureau of Statistics. Recall that. So we need to see pressure put on the government to make the University of Guyana free, to kind of get the ball rolling in terms of mass training. This is an area that I would advise young people to advocate on. And in addition to that, there are technical schools, whether it's your Linden Technical Institute, whether it's your GTI. Try and then see whether or not they have programs that you would like to enroll in. Try and build your skills. This is the time to build your skills. You're seeing the country grow. Ask yourself this: how many times will you have the opportunity to be in a country growing at 60% in 1 year? How many people in the history of the world have had that opportunity? Not many people. Now, the last remark I would say is this, and as we close off, viewers, and we thank you very much for being with us on the Lowdown. The last remark I'd say is this: it is nowhere near acceptable for the government to have a an incredibly quickly growing economy. Incredibly quickly. Oil boom, prices through the roof, country making lots of money. It is just not cool for the government not to be providing ordinary people the support they need to survive a cost of living crisis. At least people need to be able to maintain their standard of living. But if the country is doing well, the country is growing, shouldn't you be doing well as well? What is going on? We must pressure the government. We must pressure the government. We must pressure the government. Citizens, young people, push for more. The government believes that it can come to Parliament, put out a budget, and have almost nothing for the average person when it comes to this difficult cost of living situation. And they believe that that's totally fine. We must show them that it is not fine, that this is not a status quo that we are going to accept. That is the advice that I would give to young people, and I'd give to Guyanese more broadly. We have to push, because money making, as they say, money making, but this is not benefiting everyone. It really needs to benefit everyone. This is the type of society we want, and not a society where only friends and family benefit. And we'll close off with a quote, because you know when we say only friends and family benefit, people say, "Oh, y'all talking about this thing, y'all are just running your mouth. You're just saying that to attack the government." But we've heard from the government's own mouth. Sue is my friend. He gets all the support. So when we said friends and family and so on, this is not some hypothetical. This is factual. Sue is my friend. He gets all the support, unless certain person is going to deny that that's what he said. So when we say friends of the government, that's who benefits. The government also says that friends of the government benefits. So let's establish that as fact. That's the fact. Unless we hear some sort of a retraction, we're looking forward to seeing about that. Folks, this time in a long time. This time in a long time. I'll leave you on that note. Thank you for joining me here on the Lowdown. It's always good to have you here. It's always good to have a Saturday night chat with you. And we look forward to talking with you on Tuesday and then on Saturday again.
Thank you for watching our program. See you right back here, same place, same time. And remember, hold the line of battle, comrades. Our victory is sure.